for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson. I'm your co-host.
Hi, my name is Jack Prince, your fellow co-host.
Well, Jack, we've got quite a bit to talk about today. We're going to focus mostly on what's happening in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we'll talk a little bit about some coronavirus stuff. But before we get to that, a couple reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker.com. Do a search for Southpaws there. You can find us at the iTunes Store. Do a search under Podcasts for Southpaws, and once you find our logo, you have found us. We also send links to our podcast to our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. You can listen on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and do a search for Southpaws Radio there. Plus, you can hear us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI-FM in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and Global Community Radio Channel 1. We're on every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Make sure you check us out there. Well, we might as well get right into our top story that we're going to be talking about this week, and that is the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And we're just going to call it what it is. It's murder. Our opinion.
No question.
Yeah. So I've got this. This is the latest updates. This comes from WCCO Television. It's the CBS affiliate in Minneapolis. And this was published earlier this morning as we record on Friday, May 29th, 2020. Minneapolis has entered the fourth day of unrest in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, with rioters taking over the police department's 3rd Precinct building late Thursday night. Did you happen to see any of that footage, Jack?
I did see some of it. Yes, I did. Before you go any farther, I just want to say I think the current graphic picture, video picture, of this man having his neck sat on represents maybe the most graphic in-the-street murder, if not the most horrific. And that's from a long, long list of recordings. People are sickened. I mean, there's a Baptist church down in Tennessee or someplace that calls it a lynching. A white Baptist church. This has hit a nerve that the entire nation may see riots for days and days, justifiably so.
Yes. And George Floyd, by the way, is, the 3rd African-American that's been killed by Minneapolis police in the last couple of years?
Yeah. And this on the heels, maybe wrong way to say that, but this following the murder down, where was it, Georgia, of a jogger innocently running through a suburb, a white suburb.
Or, for that matter, what happened in Louisville with Breonna Taylor.
Yeah. It's an epidemic. It is an epidemic. It's been ramped up during the epidemic from the coronavirus. I don't know if they think it's cover. I don't know what. But it's definitely increasing tragically, stickingly. It's amazing.
And yet there's people that still deny the existence of institutional racism.
Well, that's what I say. Hey, don't you dare say this is a bad apple. This guy there in Minnesota, this Derek M. Chauvin. Don't say, well, this is just a bad apple. It is a systemic barrel filled, not just in Minnesota, but nationwide. Mm-hmm. This guy alone, sure, he had 18 offenses. He killed an Alaskan, shot an innocent Alaskan guy just a few years ago, and then a couple other people. He chased down a car that crashed, and the victims were all killed inside a car. It goes on and on and on. How he was even around is a big question. Mm-hmm. And then the other 4 little goons with him. Mm-hmm. This is systemic, folks.
It definitely is. Let me continue the story here. Again, this is WCCO television out of Minneapolis. The breach occurred at about 10 p.m. with rioters setting fires inside the building and outside near the main entrance. Police released a statement just after 10 p.m. saying in part, quote, "In the interest of the safety of our personnel, the Minneapolis Police Department evacuated the 3rd precinct of its staff. Protesters forcibly entered the building and have ignited several fires." End of quote. WCCO's Jennifer Meyerly reports that the department had discussed withdrawing officers from the building as early as noon Thursday. Officers were also seen removing the American flag from the precinct's pole at about 11:30 a.m. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey spoke to the media early Friday morning, where he took responsibility for ordering police to leave the precinct after hours of discussion with Chief Madaria Arredondo. Frey also addressed the harsh remarks Donald Trump made on Twitter late Thursday night. Here's what Donald Trump wrote on Twitter. This is a direct quote. "I can't stand back and watch this happen to a great American city, Minneapolis. A total lack of leadership. Either the very weak radical left mayor Jacob Frey get his act together and bring the city under control, or I will send in the National Guard and get the job done right. These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen. Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty, and we will assume control. But when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you."
Well, we know when the looting started. The looting started with a white plant cop.
Yep.
They know his name. His name is Jacob Peterson. He's been identified by his ex-wife. He took a 8-inch long hammer and smashed all the windows of an AutoZone, and that was the very first building to be looted. I'm not saying that their riot is not justified, but here we have a provocateur. A provocateur, a French word that means very simply that you go in and you instigate violence, because then you turn that around against the people.
Yeah.
That supposedly you disagree with. It's a long-standing tactic. It was done recently in South Dakota, where many provocateurs were uncovered who came to either pretend that they were Indians and were inciting violence. It goes back to Andrew Jackson's day when provocateurs dressed up like Indians.
Oh, Jack, it goes back to the start of the Revolutionary War when provocateurs dressed up like Indians and tossed tea into Boston Harbor. Yeah, we have a long history of this, folks.
Yeah, you have a classic example of it there in the city of St. Paul, and yet you have a president saying when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Well, you better line up the 6'4" white cop who had a black umbrella and a mask on and who got aggressive with people when they asked him, "Are you a effing cop?" Because that's where it started, Trump.
Yeah, people aren't fooled by this.
No, I'm glad they were brave enough. Somebody's brave enough to chase this guy through the parking lot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you haven't seen the video of it, it's on YouTube. You need to go check it out, folks. It's just amazing. And by the way, Donald Trump's tweet, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts," it got flagged by Twitter for a violation of their terms of service for glorifying violence. We'll get to more of Donald Trump's war with Twitter here a little bit later on in the show, but let's continue. Mayor Frey said, quote, "Weakness is pointing the finger at someone else during a time of crisis. Donald J. Trump knows nothing about the strength of Minneapolis. We are strong as hell, and you better be damn sure we're going to get through this." End of quote. About 2.5 hours after Trump's tweets, Twitter flagged the latter of the two in which he wrote of protests and riots in the Twin Cities. "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." Here was a statement from Twitter. Quote, "This tweet violates our policies regarding the glorification of violence based on the historical context of the last line, its connection to violence, and the risk it could inspire similar actions today." End of quote.
Yeah.
About 90 minutes after the 3rd precinct was overrun by rioters, city officials warned that the precinct's building's gas line may have been severed and the building may be in danger of exploding.
Wow.
Anything they can do to get everybody out, right? Yeah. The Minneapolis National Guard said 500 soldiers arrived in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and surrounding suburbs late Thursday night to, quote, protect life, preserve property, and the right to peacefully demonstrate, end of quote. Let's just rearrange the priorities here. Their number one priority is the preservation of property.
Mm-hmm. Always has been.
It absolutely has been. Don't let them bullshit you with any other kind of language that they say that they're protecting life. Really.
Yeah. And then you look at the army, the phalanx, the army of policemen surrounding the murderer's house, who's on paid leave vacation. I would ask.
Well, no, he's fired. He has been fired.
Oh, there's no. Okay,
they fired the 4 cops. They are now unemployed. They have not been arrested.
I see that they've not been arrested because, according to the FBI, they're doing more. They need more proof. They need to study the proof more. They need to study the evidence more.
Yeah, that's the DA is saying that.
Yeah, which is total horse crap. That's just equivocation. That's all it is. Stall it out, take the focus off, denigrate the protesters, go on, show hour after hour of a burning building, and attack the protesters. And then suddenly the whole idea of arresting this murder, this confirmed murder, this exposed murder, diminishes. And for those who think that these riots are uncalled for, and I'm not proposing violence, I've said that earlier, but the truth is a black leader who's been immortalized in our country named Martin Luther King said rather clearly, riot is the voice of the unheard. When you have no other options, when you have no hope after years of open, blatant murder of your people in the streets, and your children aren't safe to walk down the street, and your protesters, like Kaepernick, have been castigated and attacked, you have to ask yourself, what is there to have our voice heard? And again, I repeat, and it should be on the front page, but you won't see it. Martin Luther King claiming that riot is the voice of the unheard.
Yep.
So poignant and powerful right now.
Yep. Let me continue. After daybreak Friday, the soldiers, accompanied by the Minnesota State Patrol, began clearing people out of the area around the 3rd Precinct. Around 6 a.m., troopers arrested a black CNN correspondent, Omar Jimenez, and his crew as they reported on the unrest in city live on air. A white correspondent nearby was not arrested, according to the network. CNN reported that Jimenez was released before 7 a.m. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz personally apologized to the network's president, accepting full responsibility. So let's just focus on this for a little bit. You've got a reporter who is half Latino and half black getting arrested on live national television. You know what his crime was? The cops told him to move, and he didn't move fast enough for them.
That was crap. That was total bull crap.
Yeah. Yet, the white reporter who works for the same network, when he showed his credentials, when he was told to move, okay, you're fine, you can stay. This is why we say institutional racism.
Exactly.
Right there's your proof, right there.
Let's back this all the way up before even the murder. You had a woman call maintaining that this person, Mr. Floyd, had passed a bad check, which has been proven to be total baloney.
Well, now they're saying that it was a fake $20 bill. So somebody doesn't have their story correct.
Well, they're scratching like mad to try and come up. I mean, listen, if it was written on toilet paper, you don't stand on a man's neck. You remember Malcolm's quote very clearly? He said, hey, I don't have a chip on my shoulder. I got your foot on my neck.
Yep.
And here's the thing, though. Going back to the bad check, it's reminiscent to me of the accuser of Emmett Till. Remember Emmett Till way down south years and years ago, who a little white tart went to her hubby and said, I was whistled at or I was flirted with.
Yeah, wolf whistled.
Yeah, and then, of course, as we know historically, she came out later and said that she had made up the entire story.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in the meantime, he was tortured and drug around town, I think, and finally, killed, thrown in a lake.
Yeah.
And the white jury, there's pictures of it, were sitting there, coming down, patting him on. The white jury, after the verdict, came down, patting him on the back, so relieved that he wasn't in any way penalized. This is the kind of systemic racism, or you call it institutional racism? Is that what you just called it a minute ago?
Yep.
Yeah. This is the kind of cycle it runs through. It starts with a false accusation, then it's got excessive arrest, or even worse, a murder within the arrest, and then it's got the white backlash and the cover-up, and then a slow denigration of the black response. We've gone through this like a stuck record over and over and over again. It's a predictable stage. What we'll hear next with Trump's motivation and push, you'll hear nothing but attacks against these black thugs up there, who then will be accused of bringing in black instigators from across the country, and then it'd be turned within weeks. It'd be turned into a complete, out of control black protesters, and you will forget that a murder took place. Right in front of your face. Is this one going to be any different, Darren? And if it is, you tell me how it's going to be different. What can we do? I know Jeff Smith. I know him quite well. I've watched his posts. I've talked with him numerous times. I've even worked with him. I've never seen him so angry. I see it in his articles. I know he's not out of control in any way. But his call is white people do something.
Mm-hmm.
And we know what the black people are doing, and rightfully so, in my estimation. But what do you think, Darren? I'm asking you point blank. What can we do? What can white people do? If this is different, what's it going to promulgate? What's going to be different this time?
Quite truthfully, there needs to be solidarity with rioters. That's bottom line.
Okay, there you go. You know what? I think that's bold. I don't see any problem with that. Now, practically, that means that we defend whatever tactics they employ.
That's right.
I mean, we talked about the Boston Tea Party. That was a destruction of property, and now that's revered by the white supremacists, right, as an act of patriotism.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, let's work with that. Go for it.
Well, we talked before we started recording today. Colin Kaepernick got on Twitter, and he said, what do you expect us to do? We should be allowed to fight back. That's a paraphrase, but that's pretty much what he said. We should be allowed to fight back. And he's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
again, like Malcolm said, we'll be friends with somebody who's friends with us, but we're not going to stand back and let our family and our kids be murdered.
That's right.
And there are parents across this nation who are afraid for their teen walking down to the store.
Jack, you have never had to have that conversation with your children, have you? About what you should be doing if you're approached by a police officer. You've never had that conversation.
No.
You've never felt the need to have that conversation.
No, I can't imagine the fear and the terror.
Well, you know that many African-American parents have had that conversation with their young sons, their young daughters.
It's canon now.
Yeah, it is. It's pathetic. It's sad. Something needs to change. It needs to change now, one way or another. Matter of fact, let me continue the story here. In North Minneapolis overnight, a woman's body was found in a car, prompting a death investigation. Police say there were signs of trauma on the body, which was found at the intersection of Bryant and 17th Avenues. This could be the second fatal incident connected with the nights of unrest in the city. The other one was a store owner shot a looter and killed him, and that store owner has been arrested. And
they played like they didn't know what caused that shooting.
Mm-hmm. St. Paul was spared from the chaos Wednesday night, but that all changed Thursday. The St. Paul Police Department said more than 170 businesses were looted or damaged Thursday, and dozens of fires were set. But there were no serious injuries reported in the city. Fires continued to burn in the city early Friday morning, with the largest one at Big Top Liquor near Snelling and University Avenues, nearby Alliance Field. Looters entered Northtown Mall in Blaine late Thursday night, but police said they soon took control of the shopping center. Police presence was also strong throughout downtown Minneapolis early Friday morning. Thousands gathered in downtown Minneapolis early Thursday evening at the Hennepin County Government Center to demand justice for Floyd before marching down Marquette Avenue. Peaceful protesters made their way down Nicollet Mall, where several businesses boarded up their first-floor windows, including Target, J.B. Hudson Jewelers, and Haskell's Wine and Spirits. Jack Farrell, Haskell's president, said he respects the protest, but if his business gets looted or damaged, he's not sure if it will be able to recover, especially in light of revenue loss during the COVID-19 pandemic. Farrell said, quote, "This could be the death knell for downtown Minneapolis," end of quote.
Hey, white people, it's the only thing you understand is when it hits your pocketbook.
That's right. That's a very good point, Jack. Absolutely correct. Let me continue. By about 9 p.m., tensions began to flare up between protesters and law enforcement near the light rail station off 5th Street and Hennepin Avenue. Some of those protesters took to Interstate 35 West just before 10 p.m., leading to the closure of the Washington Avenue exit. In South Minneapolis, police say there was a shooting at about 8:30 p.m. at the Walgreens Pharmacy on the 3100 block of Lake Street, just a few blocks down from the 3rd Precinct protest site. Within the hour of the shooting, Maxit Pawn Shop near the 3rd Precinct erupted in flames. Earlier, the Target store near the 3rd Precinct, which was looted Wednesday night, became another chaotic focal point, with dozens of people gathered in the parking lot. A car was set on fire just after 7 p.m. Looting spread to St. Paul beginning early Thursday afternoon, with businesses being targeted along University Avenue in the Midway neighborhood. Police clashed with looters and protesters for hours. The looting expanded throughout the city Thursday evening, with Grand Avenue businesses in peril. Well, we know where WCCO is landing on this, right? By 8 p.m., there were reports of several fires in the capital city. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz signed an executive order Thursday afternoon to activate the National Guard to, quote, "to help protect Minnesotans' safety and maintain peace in the wake of George Floyd's death," end of quote. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey also declared a local emergency late Thursday. Several businesses in the Twin Cities closed down and boarded up in anticipation of continued riots and looting, including the Mall of America and Rosedale Center. Metro Transit announced the suspension of all buses and light rail operation through the weekend. On Wednesday night, protests outside Minneapolis Police's 3rd Precinct building turned into a fiery, deadly riot, with dozens of businesses along East Lake Avenue looted. At least 15 fires were intentionally set in the area, including at an AutoZone store, a Wendy's restaurant, and an affordable housing complex that was under construction. All 3 completely burned down. See, now I've heard about the AutoZone and the construction project. This is the first I've heard about the Wendy's restaurant. Rioters hurled a variety of projectiles at officers, the 3rd Precinct building, and squad cars, while rubber bullets and tear gas canisters were launched by police. Let me stop there, because last night there were some reports on social media that the police were now using live rounds because they had run out of rubber bullets.
Sure they have. Yeah, sure they have. Bullets. First of all, you shouldn't even be shooting rubber bullets.
Yeah.
What you might do is shoot a foghorn off, put a camera, put a spotlight on a podium in front of the police department, march your chief of police out there, and say that the victim's murderer has been arrested. We understand your angst. We will prosecute whatever. You, by your abstinence and your refusal to perform, I'm going to say it in a turnaround way, criminal justice. The justice they are in working with in league of is criminal justice. And you are inflaming these people by every second that ticks by. You want to stop it? Put your bullets away and stand up and do what you should do. Which the chief of police in Detroit has called for, which dozens of high-profile people, which the United Nations has called for. You have to do the right thing to stop what you call is the wrong thing. And if you don't, it's just going to be heightened.
Now, let me ask you this, Jack. Let's say that those officers are arrested. You think there's going to be any convictions?
Well, that's the thing. That's the problem. It certainly would diffuse the rioting for the moment, I would imagine. If it doesn't, so what? Because like you said, there's been no precedent set in history where anytime there's been an arrest. I did notice, ironically, the guy that drugged the black victim around with the back of his car, I think that was in Wyoming, is due to be executed here this week, I believe it is.
Really?
Yeah, so there are episodes, there are some instances where there has been justice fulfilled. In this case, with all of the public pressure, you'd have to think there's a good chance of this, but that's not their tactic. Their tactic right now is to rope-a-dope. Rope-a-dope, buy some time, and then somehow wiggle the hell out of it. Mm-hmm. Have you seen this guy's rap sheet? Have you seen, do you know who Derek M. Chauvin really is? Have you seen a list?
Yeah, I saw the list. It's been floating around social media.
How the hell would you expect him to be acquitted after the most graphic caught display of wanton murder? It would seem to be impossible. I understand your point. I wouldn't bet one way or the other on it.
Two
but
words.
One thing's for sure. You've got to arrest him. You've got to arrest him now. What's that?
2 words. Institutional racism.
You got it.
Right there's your explanation. This cop will get off if he's arrested. I guarantee it.
Disgusting. It may happen. I'm not disagreeing. It's revolting.
Yep. Let me continue real quick here. I had mentioned the store owner earlier. Here are the details. An East Lake Street pawn shop owner is now in police custody after allegedly shooting a suspected looter dead during Wednesday night's chaos. This whole spate of rioting started when George Floyd was murdered Sunday night outside of Cup Foods. I'm kind of paraphrasing the story here. Former police officer Derek Chauvin, who is white, knelt on this guy's neck for more than 7 minutes while he's saying he can't breathe. He's calling out for his deceased mother. It's all on video, folks.
Yep.
The store's owner, Mahmoud Abumalye, told WCCO television that one of his employees called 911 on Floyd because he bought a pack of cigarettes with a counterfeit $20 bill. The owner says he confronted Floyd, who was sitting in his car outside. He said Floyd apologized and gave back the cigarettes. The store owner said that Floyd appeared to be intoxicated and seemed somewhat out of control. He says he wants justice for Floyd and has offered to pay his funeral expenses.
Oh, that's great. That's just touching. It's puke in my book. Don't believe it.
How about if you don't call 911 in the first place?
Yeah, how about the woman just this week they found, I think it was in Central Park in New York, was upset some guy was photographing pictures. She said, you know what I'll do? I'll call the police and tell them a black man is threatening my life.
Yeah, that backfired on her.
Yeah, well, that's all too common.
Yeah, the guy was bird watching. They were in a bird sanctuary of some kind, or in a park somewhere. The guy was watching birds, asked the woman to leash her dog that she just adopted. And so she starts reading this guy the riot act and calls the cops on him, saying, this guy's threatening me. Well, the guy was recording her. So when that leaked out, she has lost her job. She was fired from her job.
Good, great.
The dog that she had, she returned to the shelter that she adopted it from.
But what's reflected in that incident is the guaranteed threat. If I open my white mouth and claim you're threatening me, you could be killed. Mm-hmm. And she played that card.
Yep.
Darren, real quick, I just find it amazing. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. 18 years earlier, there was another shooting in Minnesota by a white policeman to an innocent man named Christopher Burns. 18 years ago, and there was a white prosecutor. Matter of fact, this prosecutor was the chief prosecutor for Minneapolis.
And I know who you're going to mention.
And she refused to prosecute the police. And so that kind of precedence means it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. By the way, that woman was a VP candidate for the Vice President of the United States, Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah, presidential candidate and Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Sucking the establishment's you-know-what.
Yep.
Wanting the police union support and turning her back on murder. And she's not the first one. Hey, what a list the VP list is, right?
Yeah, no
you got
kidding.
Amy, you got Stacy, who has refused to side with the army of women who claiming that they've been abused by Biden, and she refuses to even consider that. Then you got little Lizzie Warren, who's backed off on these
backed off on Medicare for all.
Yeah, there's your list, folks. And Amy is part and parcel. I don't care what you want to say. She's part and part of the white legacy who allows this kind of things to happen. This cop knew it was a small chance he'd ever be prosecuted. He still may think that's the case. And he might be right.
Yeah. Let me continue. Protesters also gathered for a third day outside Chauvin's Oakdale home. 6 people were arrested outside his residence Wednesday night for unlawful assembly. Chauvin was fired Monday by Chief Arredondo, along with the 3 other officers involved, To Tao, Thomas Lane, and J. Alexander Koenig. Tao was seen standing between Chauvin and bystanders who were recording the encounter, while Lane and Koenig helped restrain the handcuffed Floyd, who repeatedly said that he couldn't breathe. Several lawmakers and politicians, including Mayor Frey, have called for the arrest of all 4 officers and the swift filing of criminal charges. Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman announced early Thursday evening that he was not ready to do so. Here's what he said, quote, "We're going to investigate this as expeditiously, as thoroughly, and completely as justice demands. Sometimes that takes a little time, and we ask people to be patient. We have to do this right." End of quote. Freeman's delay sparked criticism from Maryland State Attorney General Marilyn Mosby, who took issue with Freeman's remarks about her state's handling of Freddie Gray's death in 2015. Here was the response from Marilyn Mosby. Quote, "First and foremost, I send my heartfelt condolences to Mr. Floyd's family, who had to watch as their loved one was murdered on camera. For Hennepin County Attorney Michael Freeman to use my office to justify his inaction on the tragic and public killing of George Floyd is shameful. Saying that there was a rush to charge, a rush to justice in the Freddie Gray case is demonstrably false. I stand by the decision I made 12 days after Freddie Gray was killed. I didn't have video footage of a murder, evidence any prosecutor would dream of. Mr. Freeman needs to own his decisions and be courageous enough to decide whether or not to prosecute and pursue justice for the murder of George Floyd." Again, that's from Maryland State Attorney General Marilyn Mosby. So what Freeman is apparently saying is, well, I'm going to take my time because look what they did in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. Look how they did Freddie Gray.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Is Johnny got caught with his hand in the cookie jar and says, well, Billy took cookies too. Well, we're not talking about Billy. We're talking about you, Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same thing, and it's disgusting.
That is
putrid.
Yeah.
But what do you expect from law enforcement? What do you expect from them? This is systemic.
We have to remember, when we say law enforcement in the United States, unlike Europe and many of our ancestral countries, the police in our country started as slave patrols. Now, that's not an exaggeration. That was the first catalyst for formation of police. There were groups of men that were out to track down slaves, black slaves. And with that, is it difficult to extrapolate where today you've got open hunting season on blacks in America by the police?
Yeah.
They've got a legal, protected way to go out and kill. Some of the pictures I've seen in the last week where they're attacking women, where this cop runs down the street and like a linebacker just drives her into the wall. Did you see that footage by any chance?
I did not. Where was that at?
I don't even know where it was at. You jump up off the seat. And of course, we have the incidents right here in Ypsilanti.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, earlier this week there was footage released of a cop in Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is right next door to Ann Arbor, punching a black woman in the face.
Yeah. I don't think we're that far away from the governor reopening the state of Michigan. I'm not saying I agree with that. I think she's been pressured and bullied, threatened, et cetera, et cetera. But when it does, there's no reason in the world you would have to go to Minneapolis to protest black violence.
Yep.
You got the fields are white in the harvest right here, no pun intended, right here.
Well, there's going to be
right here in Michigan.
There's protests going to happen all over the country. We mentioned Denver, we mentioned Louisville, New York City. Detroit's supposed to have a big protest, I believe, sometime Friday. It might be over the weekend. There's going to be a protest in Grand Rapids.
You know, Darren, here's a good comparison. How many times have you heard that the psychological impact of the coronavirus has been devastating to the citizens of this country? We've never had more people with anxiety. We've never had more calls to mental institutions and help because of the pressure of this virus and the threat of death.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine what it's been. Take that same environment and put that on the black mind for the last 300 years.
Yeah.
It would be any less severe? I think the comparison is pretty equal. And they've been carrying that for decades, for centuries.
For centuries, exactly. As a matter of fact, here's another example of institutional racism. This is by Janelle Griffith, writing for NBC News. It's dated May 27th. A Louisiana police officer was fired over a Facebook comment that said it was unfortunate more black people did not die of the coronavirus. The chief of police in Kaplan, about 87 miles southwest of Baton Rouge, said Officer Stephen Alcoin commented under a local news station's live feed of the governor's coronavirus news conference on May 15th. Alcoin was fired later that day. CBS affiliate KLFY in Lafayette, Louisiana, reported that Alcoin's post was made on its Facebook page in response to another commenter who wrote, quote, "Virus that was created to kill all the blacks is death," end of quote. Alcoin responded, quote, "Well, it didn't work. How unfortunate," end of quote. By the way, they got screenshots of this and published the screenshots. The police department said in a statement on its Facebook page that it was made aware of Alcoin's comments. Chief Joshua Hardy looked into it, and the officer was terminated. The statement from the police department said, quote, "Chief Hardy and the Kaplan Police Department would like to apologize for this matter," end of quote. Hardy did not immediately return a request for comment from NBC News Wednesday. Alcoin could not be reached for comment. Alcoin had worked previously for the department for 8 months and had been back on the force for about 3 months before he was let go. That is according to a spokeswoman for the police department. Chief Hardy said the department does not tolerate such behavior. He told KLFY television, quote, "As a police officer, we're held to a higher standard than normal civilians, so you got to watch what you do, you got to watch what you say. You can't just go and post anything you want on social media," end of quote. True, but you can put your knee on the back of a black man's neck and choke him out and kill him for 7 minutes.
Yeah. That's a technique, by the way, which the police have used numerous times. They got it down. They know what they're doing. I got a picture of them doing it to Indians in South Dakota just a few months ago, last summer.
Hey, here's the thing. He wasn't authorized to use that move. That's not part of their protocol.
That's true. Yep, exactly.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Here's what I'm worried about, Darren.
Yeah.
This episode in Minnesota, this tragedy followed now by the protest, is just going to draw, it's a flashpoint for the same white nuts we've seen right here in our own capital with guns 6 feet long that will be drawn in. I've already seen these white supremacists with their guns. It's become just an icon of idiocy, standing in front of stores in, I guess it's in Minnesota, protecting them from being looted.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a fuse that's been sitting there, and it's about to be lit, I'm afraid. And leave it to the black population who mounted the greatest protest in American history in the civil rights movements. You've never seen greater displays of courage than 100-pound women standing in front of German shepherds snapping at their jugular vein, or kids being blown across a parking lot with the spray of a hose from the fire department. And they stood there without violence. They stood there and they took it for months and months and months and months. You've never seen greater American patriotism than by the black community in the United States. That's my maintenance. And now, leave it to them. Leave it to them to start what should have been going on from the white community, and that is a real accounting call on the black murder in the streets by the police departments. And they would get the credit because they're the ones who say, that's enough. That's enough. And it's going to, like a poultice, it's going to draw the poison out of our society again, thanks to those courageous people. I gotta tell you, I'm not going to go to Minnesota But you get me a protest here in Michigan, I'm there. I know this coronavirus, I know that whole backdrop, but this is it. The white community's got to stand up. I'm white, and I'm going to do what I can and what you've suggested, and that is to stand with them in the protest and avoid the BS labeling that is violent or whatever. I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk to as many people as I can. That's it. This murder, we can as human beings sit back and not do something.
Exactly. And there's going to be protests, like I said, Detroit. There's one scheduled for Grand Rapids. It's on social media. It's
when is the one?
Really easy to find. I don't remember the dates. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Speaking of the coronavirus, let's get on to this. Since we've been talking about violence, now we're going to talk about the coronavirus and violence. You gave me this story. This is Isaac Schur writing for Business Insider. This is dated May 26th. In North Carolina, an anti-lockdown movement that has gained momentum since April took a new turn. The founder's husband said he wouldn't rule out violence to avoid coronavirus-related safety measures. Adam Smith, the husband of Reopen NC leader and founder Ashley Smith, said in a series of videos on Friday, quote, "Are we willing to kill people? Are we willing to lay our lives down? We have to say yes." End of quote. He deleted the videos after Raw Story began reporting on them. He continued in the videos, quote, "Is that violence? Is that terrorism? No, it's not terrorism. I'm not trying to strike fear in people by saying I'm going to kill you. I'm going to say, if you bring guns, I'm going to bring guns. If you're armed with this, we're going to be armed with this." End of quote. Sounds like terrorism to me, doesn't it?
Oh, you're darn right. These guys that turn right around and will not admit the obvious. It's a joke. It's like the song we've played before on the show. I didn't do it. I can't remember the actual.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
Title of the song. Wasn't me.
Yeah.
But here's a point I want to make. Wisconsin now is recording just a runaway corona increase. Okay, and some other states. But interestingly, not surprisingly, Florida and some other redneck states, Bible Belt states, if you will, their numbers haven't gone up noticeably, particularly right after the so-called reopening of the state. But now the truth is sifting through, where it's been revealed that DeSantis, the governor of Florida, he's refusing to let the medical examiners give accurate information so that they're labeling deaths caused by COVID as pneumonia. Mm-hmm. The numbers are unarguable. It was at average for 5-6 years, around 2,500 deaths a year. They've had almost 5,000 deaths in just a couple of months from pneumonia. That's what they list on the death certificate. Mm-hmm. These are people dying of the virus. If people drive into the state on vacation, and there just happens to be a few of those in Florida, if they die, that's not reported. There's no recording of that.
They're supposed to be reporting it to the state where the person has their permanent residence. We talked about this recently on the show.
Yeah.
And I talked to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and you know how much information they received from Florida? Nothing.
Zero. Nothing. And Florida's not, Michigan's not the only state that's sending tourists or people down there. So what you have is a vast cover-up. And meanwhile, Trump's running around saying that the numbers are inflated and the numbers are inaccurate because it's hard for him to swallow. We went through 100,000 people. We're up to about 103,000 right now. And rather than identify with that, by the way, did you see the post? I think the billboard, I can't remember where it's at, where it has the big 100,000. Then it has the orange baboon's face down the bottom with the quote, "I'm not responsible."
Yep.
That needs to be driven into the consciousness of the Americans.
This is their new hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's going to go away. You've got a willing bunch of Republican governors covering over the sheer truth at the expense of more people's lives. Because the more it's covered over and the more people are comfortable, the more people are going to die. The blood's on their hands, on their head. You want to talk about red hats? They got red blood on their head.
Exactly. And it's not just the citizens. I've got this story. This is Peter Wade writing for Rolling Stone magazine. This is dated May 28th. A Democratic Pennsylvania state representative went on a righteous tirade in a 12-minute video after learning that the Republican Speaker of the House informed his party, but not Democrats, that at least one member of his caucus tested positive for COVID-19.
Wow.
Representative Brian Sims said on Facebook Live on Wednesday night, quote, "Every single day of this crisis, this state government committee in Pennsylvania has met so that their members could line up one after one after one and explain that it was safe to go back to work. During that time period, they were testing positive. They were notifying one another, and they didn't notify us." End of quote. I'm just going to make a quick disclaimer here. Brian Sims used to be a Facebook friend of mine. I think I got mad at him and cut him off because he started the establishment talk BS.
Darren, weren't the HIV people that knew they had HIV that indulged in sex, weren't they prosecuted?
Yes, they were.
Why is this any less than attempted murder? Why couldn't you call this attempted murder?
Jack, there's still a law in the books in the state of Michigan. If you have HIV and you knowingly expose somebody else to it, that's 10 years in prison for you.
Hell yes. And this is worse. This may be more fatal than HIV.
Yeah. Let me continue. According to Sims, Democrats only recently became aware that a Republican colleague tested positive for the virus, but continued to work in the Capitol for at least a week. Sims angrily yelled into the camera, accusing Republicans of endangering members, their staffs, and their families. Quote, "I'm right now surrounded by members that can't go see their kids, that are having to call their husbands, having to call their wives and saying, 'Honey, I might have exposed you and everybody I love in the world because one of my colleagues tested positive, but he was protecting his family but not protecting mine, and Republican leadership protected him.'" End of quote.
Yeah, and protecting his party.
And Sims, while he was saying this, was at times pounding on his desk.
Don't blame him.
He continued, quote, "I've spent so much of my time here trying to see beyond the blind, disgusting partisanship, and now that partisanship has grown deadly." End of quote.
Well said.
Yep, I think he said perfectly. Let me continue here. Sims went on to call for a full-blown investigation by the Attorney General and the State Secretary of Health to determine if it is safe for members to be in the Capitol, which he demanded should be scrubbed from top to bottom. In addition, he called for everyone who works in the building to get tested and for that testing to be paid for by the Republican caucus. He also called on House Speaker Mike Turzai to resign. Sims also expressed anger at Republican Representative Russ Diamond because he self-quarantined but was not tested for COVID-19 after possible exposure. Sims said, quote, "Russ Diamond walked around the House floor every day without a mask on. Just a little bit ago, I was on the House floor, and at one point, only 4 Republican members had their masks on. Holy shit." End of quote.
Well, I think they're safe with the Republicans because most of the Republicans have their head up their ass, so really it's safe.
Oh, God.
Sorry
Let me continue here. Diamond responded to Sims's accusation on Twitter, writing this, quote, "Lefties whine because I self-quarantined but didn't get tested after possible COVID contact. Confirmed by my doc. No reason for testing, even if I could get tested without symptoms. I feel like $1 million. Well, 500,000 after lefties tax me." End of quote. You know what Russ Diamond is? He's an asshole. Plain, simple asshole.
Yeah.
Somebody ought to slap him.
Yeah, in my book, you can throw Rand Paul in the same group.
Oh, Rand Paul. Yeah, it's too bad his neighbor didn't kick his ass a little harder a few years ago. Deserves it. These jerks deserve it. Let me continue. Republican Representative Andrew Lewis issued his response to Sims via Facebook Live and identified himself as the Republican who tested positive for COVID-19 on May 20th, saying that he informed very few people of his diagnosis to protect privacy. Lewis also claimed that he only came into contact with a handful of people when he was in the Capitol on May 14th, all of whom were notified, and he said none of them tested positive as far as he knows. Lewis said, quote, "It's pretty much a ghost town at the Capitol now. I actually only interacted with a handful of folks. Anyone that I interacted with was notified, and I called human resources, end of quote. But here's the thing. The Centers for Disease Control recommend, quote, employers should inform fellow employees of their possible exposure to COVID-19 in the workplace, but maintain confidentiality as required by the Americans with Disability Act. That's a direct quote from the CDC.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, Democratic leader Frank Dermody said in a statement that Republicans who may have been in contact with Lewis attended meetings without masks and downplayed the need for people to wear personal protective equipment. Dermody said, quote, while we are pleased to learn that this House member seems to have recovered, it is simply unacceptable that some House Republicans knew about this for more than a week and sat on that knowledge. This attitude shows a fundamental lack of respect for fellow lawmakers. End of quote. No, that's Republicans' fundamental disrespect of Democrats and left independents.
Yeah.
That's a period, end of story. Don't talk to me, Democrats, about reaching across the aisle, because every time you reach across the aisle, the Republicans slap you, and you continue to do it. You're stupid for doing it.
Yeah, that's been their campaign motto for so long. I have reached across the aisle. Well, you better reach across and punch the guy on the other side of the aisle, because he's trying to kill you.
You're damn right about that.
Instead of pounding on the desk, pound on the heads of those idiots on the other side of the aisle, Democrats.
Yeah. Real quickly, I got this story. I want to get to Trump here because he's put his foot in his mouth again. Well, one doesn't he, I guess. This is Catherine Falders and Libby Cathy writing for ABC News. This is dated May 28th. Donald Trump on Thursday signed an executive order targeting Twitter and other social media giants, saying he is taking action to defend free speech from one of the gravest dangers it has faced in American history, after Twitter called two of his tweets potentially misleading. Calling it a big deal, Trump said the order allows for new regulations so that social media companies, quote, that engage in censoring or any political conduct will not be able to keep their liability shield, end of quote. But experts say he probably can't do much without congressional approval, and any move will be met with legal challenges. Yeah, let me tell you the legal challenge. Let's start with the First Amendment, folks. Congress shall make no law restricting free speech. It's in black and white, period. End of story. They can't do it.
It's just another empty threat. You know, he'll rant for this. What he cannot stand is that anybody stands up to him. Anybody who brings a pushback, he can't take it. He had a fit. He had a meltdown when they had the temerity to call his post violent, etc., when they should have been doing it years ago. And who's the Zuckerberg, who is trying to say there shouldn't be any type of fact check or pushback against the bull crap that comes out of Trump's tweets?
Yeah, exactly. Let me skip down a little bit here. The order calls for new regulations under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which provides broad immunity from lawsuits to websites based on the content its users post, and thus curbs some of those liability protections for companies like Twitter, Facebook, and Google. Trump claimed, quote, they have had unchecked power to censor, restrict, edit, shape, hide, alter any form of communication between private citizens or large public audiences. We are fed up with it, end of quote. No, we're fed up with your orange mouth, Trump.
Yeah.
We are fed up with your ignorant orange dipshit mouth.
You're not going to cram it down our throats anymore, unchecked.
Yeah. Unbelievable. This guy should be removed from office, period. 25th Amendment. Somebody please invoke the 25th Amendment and get him the hell out of office. Well, Pence is worse.
Don't give him a chance. Don't give him a chance to cheat again, which is what he'll do. He'll cheat his ass off come November.
Well, if you get rid of him, Pence is worse. You want to prove that to me?
Can't be worse. There is no worse.
Yeah. And people don't understand that.
But I think people are foolish. They think you're going to get rid of him. He either cheats his butt off, or as he's already indicating, he will bring his biker buddies and the military, et cetera, and the rednecks and all the white supremacists or the little pinkies. He'll bring them to make sure he's not removed from office if he should lose. Yeah. And don't think he wouldn't do it.
And here's probably a guy that was a Trump supporter. Let's go into Off the Cuff. We haven't done an Off the Cuff story in a long time. I have this. This is Derek Hutchinson writing for WDIV Television. This is dated May 22nd out of Bay City, Michigan. A Michigan man devised a plan to steal a helicopter from the Coast Guard in order to attack a police station and shooting up a hospital to disrupt the power and free the coronavirus patients, authorities said. 70-year-old Jesse Theodore McFadden is accused of calling Aranac County dispatchers around 8 a.m. Sunday to say he was on his way to the U.S. Coast Guard station in Bay City to steal a helicopter, according to officials. McFadden told dispatchers the helicopter would further his plans to attack a police station and shoot up a hospital, court records show. He wanted to disrupt the power to the hospital, unlock the doors, and release patients under COVID-19 quarantine, officials said. McFadden told authorities he was armed with a machine gun. Dispatchers said they called police in the Coast Guard station Saginaw River about the threat. They also revealed McFadden's criminal history of brandishing weapons and resisting police.
Yeah.
Coast Guard workers at the Saginaw River Station in Essexville said McFadden arrived around 10:30 a.m. in a black Ford open-bed pickup truck registered to another person. He tried to get into the station using the gate keypad, officials said. After he failed to get in several times, he called the station communications center and demanded access, according to authorities. His request was denied, so McFadden threatened to ram the gate open with his truck, according to court records. And he left at about 10:39 a.m. that morning before Essex police officers arrived. Michigan State Police troopers found the pickup truck around 11:15 a.m. at a gas station in Essexville, according to court documents. The truck was running but unoccupied with the driver's door open. When McFadden walked out of the gas station, state troopers spoke to him while a Hampton Township officer searched the truck. The officer found a Mossberg Model 500A 12-gauge shotgun on the passenger seat of the truck, loaded with 5 shells. McFadden saw that the officer had seized the shotgun and tried to hit one of the Michigan State Police troopers. He also disobeyed verbal commands and resisted attempts to place him under arrest. Officers said they used a taser on McFadden and arrested him. He was taken into custody by Hampton Township Police. Here's his past criminal record. He was convicted of 4th-degree fleeing and eluding June 15, 2011, a felony punishable by up to 2 years in prison. Authorities confirmed that the shotgun that was in his car was manufactured outside of Michigan. The criminal complaint concludes McFadden, knowing that he had been convicted of a felony offense punishable by a prison sentence of longer than 1 year, possessed a firearm in violation of the law, so they're seeking a charge for felon in possession of a firearm. Lovely.
Well, it is total reigning insanity.
It is.
I mean, seriously. He is the Facebook, or he is the face cover. He's the poster child, I should say, for the Open Again crowd. Yep. He's a team captain. Put him in the front.
Yeah. Well, we're the captains of sanity, and guess what? We got to get out of here.
If it's the last thing we ever do.
Yep.
As the song goes.
Yep. We'll be back next week, folks. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
For our announcer, Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment, and please be safe out there.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.